Welcome back to Low Carbon Lifestyle. This is the first video in a series of 3, maybe 4 videos about transport, vehicles and all the disasters that they can be. Do keep an eye out in the next few days for the second video about second-hand electric vehicles. If you live on a main road in a city like me, you realise how many cars, vans, trucks there are on our roads every day. This is the school holidays. This is during the middle of the day, it's not even rush hour, and just look how busy it is. This level of traffic is consistent all year round. Every day of the week, every week of the year, except for maybe Christmas Day. It's busy, it's smelly, it's noisy, and it's horrid. We're addicted to the convenience of a car, we're addicted to the convenience of delivery, and we live in communities that make it really easy to drive and make it really difficult to walk or ride a bike. And our world and our health is suffering from it. Episode 26 of Low Carbon Lifestyle is about our emissions linked to our addiction to the road and our addiction to cars. Cars. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Last year, Durham County Council published some data about the emissions in the county. There was some really good news. Emissions in County Durham have dropped by 53% since 1990. And this is linked to a drop of 40% in emissions from households, which is great. That's likely linked to better buildings and better insulation, better boilers and appliances, and probably most significantly, better grid electricity, which itself has seen about a 40% drop in emissions since the peak in 2007. On top of the household emissions, the industry and commercial sector in County Durham has emitted 73% less than in 2018 than it did in 1990. That is incredible, and that's what we need to do across the board over the next couple of decades. So what amazing steps have businesses taken? I'm sure there have been loads of great progress, again including the reduction in emissions in the UK grid that the County Durham's wind turbines have contributed to, and the solar panels that solar farms have contributed to. But this drop is probably mainly linked to less industry and business, including the high-end, high-energy, high-polluting manufacturing industry that is no longer in the county. It's probably just been displaced abroad with worse emissions, but because we like to pull over the wool over our eyes a little bit, we don't count it. One day I'll do a video about scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions to explain that a bit. And we may just find where the 73% has gone. But there has been some progress in business. But the most significant figure from my perspective, and the subject of this episode, is the emissions linked to transport. Since 1990 in County Durham, emissions have gone down by a measly 1%. And emissions were actually 1.5% higher in 2018 than they were in 2009. We don't have an airport in County Durham. We have the East Coast Main Line trains, and they're pretty low carbon. We have a small amount of public transport via the pretty expensive bus network. So the responsibility for our lack of progress lies squarely at the feet of our cars. The cars, vans and lorries on our roads. In 2018, those vehicles added up to 703 kilotons of CO2. And if you look outside my front door, you begin to understand why. The queues are awful. I suspect the air quality is much better. And if you spend any time outside my house, you will notice the traffic because of the noise. You're probably hearing now. But you might ask, aren't the fuel efficiency standards of our vehicles much better today than they were in 1990? And yeah, definitely, that's definitely true. The problem is the number of vehicles, the type of vehicle, and the number of miles that we drive. So a petrol or diesel car will emit about 200 to 300 grams of CO2 per mile you drive. And that's not a crazy amount, but when you think of how quickly we can travel in these cars, you could be emitting a kilogram of CO2 just by nipping across town for that 5-minute drive to B&Q, or 18 kilograms of CO2 for an hour's motorway drive. It all adds up. Why do we drive? Well, we drive because it's easy. It's convenient, it's comfortable, and for a lot of you it's dry. Maybe even we drive because that's just what people do. To some extent it's fashionable. Driving isn't actually that cheap. The 7,000 miles that we drove last year cost us about £700 in petrol. And that's before we think about insurance, MOT, which last week cost us another £280, tyres, general wear of the car, and the cost to buy a car in the first place. But in 2021, in Durham, in Britain, I would say many of us are addicted to the car despite the cost. Addicted to the convenience, despite how bad it could be for us. As well as the CO2 emissions linked to driving, it's estimated that air pollution linked to cars contributes to the premature death of about 500,000 people in Europe every year. Even with our high standards on car emissions, we are poisoning ourselves just so we can nip out in the car. Author, academic and campaigner Andrew Sims says in a BBC video that you only have to drive 500 metres to melt 1 kilogram of glacier ice in terms of CO2 emissions. Wow. He goes on to state really clearly that every time you use your car, you're contributing to the degradation of the planet. And a lot of that is just unnecessary. It might surprise you that in the UK, for journeys between 1 and 2 miles, so less than 3 kilometres and probably about a 25-30 minute walk, 6 out of 10 people will drive. Does that surprise you? I've had the very pleasant experience of riding my bike in traffic many times. I used to commute on my bike to work. And one thing that slightly elevated position shows you is how many people are on their phones whilst driving. But that's a different story for maybe a different video. The second thing it shows is how many people in big, chunky cars with 5 seats or more are driving on their own. For me, it raises some questions about what that car is for. It doesn't meet the purpose that it's needed for. So yeah, there will be families that need extra space for some journeys. There'll be some professions that need extra space for carrying equipment, etc. But loads of the big cars on the road are there just because of fashion. We've made the choice to drive big because we think it's cool. All around the world, the market for SUVs, which I guess is an American phrase, or crossovers, whatever that word means, big cars, that market has exploded over the last 10 years. In 2021, it's estimated that if SUV drivers were a nation, they'd be the world's 7th biggest carbon polluter. So despite engine technology developing and the increase in hybrids, do you remember the Toyota Prius? And even the increase in pure electric vehicles over the last decade, in County Durham, transport emissions have gone up by 1.5%. That's no good. So we need to do something about this. We need to reduce the number of journeys taken by car. We need to take the less convenient option more often. We need to make communities more walkable, and so to do that, maybe you need to get in touch with your local councillor. Maybe you could ask for a low traffic neighbourhood, which actually are really wonderful things, or you could ask for a parklet on your street. Search parklet and living streets on Ecosia after this video. We need to make communities more rideable, which tends to mean slowing traffic down, giving segregated space for cyclists so it's safe, and making driving a little bit more difficult. We need to make driving a little less convenient, and we need to make it more expensive. And when we do think about needing a car, we need to reduce the size of the car we might look at buying. And when we can socialise more, we need to car share where we can. We need to reduce the number of miles driven. We need to walk the extra mile. We need to ride that bit further. We need to stop using cars. So next time you just need to nip out, ask yourself, would it hurt if we walked? Where else could we go that would mean we could walk instead of drive? And next time you get the chance to change cars, to upgrade your car, to downgrade your car, to buy, to lease or to hire, why don't you look at a car one smaller than you have before? One smaller than the marketing suggests you need. Less SUV, more mini. Less V8, more sedate. Let's downsize. So in the next video we're going to think about electric vehicles and how it might be easier than you think to transition. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that's been helpful. I hope it's been a little bit inspiring, and as the weather gets better, let's get our bikes out again. Let's dust them off. Let's ride instead of drive. Or let's take the slow road and let's wander instead of rushing to a shop. Let's keep fossil fuels where they belong, in a museum or in the ground.
Cars. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Cars. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.